Hello AUB and hello world. Welcome to the first episode of AUB Talks. My name is Jamal.
And I'm Seema, and we'll be your hosts for today's show. Okay, but what is AUB Talks? AUB Talks is a platform by the students for the students, where we're going to be discussing issues affecting AUB students and the general public in Lebanon in general. So to start off with today's kind of preview of each segment, we're going to start up with a light news feed segment, and then we're going to jump into a discussion on the two hottest topics at the time being, the local economy and coronavirus.
We will be discussing the social and economic situation in Lebanon, as well as addressing the subject of the hour, coping with COVID-19. To better understand these events, we'll be talking to Mr. Jamal Saghir, an economics expert, as well as Mr. Chant Kazandjian, a specialist in clinical mental health. And finally, for a perspective from a medical specialist, we'll be talking to Dr. Suha Kanj, the head of the Division of Infectious Diseases at AUB-MC.
And keeping in mind that we're going to be having some interluding voices from students all around campus, we are going to have a back and forth discussion with each of them, and hopefully we'll gain more of your insight in the future. And we'll finally end the show with a surprise segment that I think everyone is gonna love actually. So let's get started. Okay, and now starting with the news segment. We have some very interesting and somewhat exciting news to share with you.
With the closure of all private and public schools, over 1 million students are stuck at home, missing their opportunity to precious education. In order to cope with this, the Lebanese Alternate Learning Association developed a digital education platform called Tabshura. Tabshura is a free education platform. It's offered in 3 languages. It has been approved by the Ministry of Education, and it abides by the official Lebanese curriculum outcomes. It's an innovative approach to learning, and if you'd like to learn more about it, you can visit their website, tabshura.com.
LBCI has taken on a humanitarian initiative by distributing food rations throughout Lebanon due to the lockdown, due to the outbreak. I think it's a lovely initiative to take on, and we're seeing similar results by independent activists who are donating medication, food, even money to people in need. And so if any of you wish to donate money, food, medication, even offer suggestions about job opportunities, please check out the Facebook page Kitfi Bikitfak. So Kitfi Bikitfak is a youth campaign that kind of aims to be a safety net to all families and any individual that's kind of been threatened by the economic crisis and the health crisis going on in the country. So please check it out. And starting up with a word by Dr. Talal Nizameddin.
I'm Dean Talal Nizameddin. I'm the Dean of Student Affairs at the American University of Beirut. For those of you that know me, I'd like to say a special hello and hope you're doing well. For those that don't know me, I hope that I will see you soon and meet you on our beautiful campus. I'm now taking part in a wonderful student initiative, AUB Talks, to try and recreate that spirit of AUB campus online or virtually. This is a great initiative, as many initiatives are taking place through various platforms. The Office of Student Affairs, as you know, many of you may have seen on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, has been activating many of its units to try and connect with you, both to lighten the mood, to create some life, and also at the same time to share very important messages to you about the support that you can still get. There is a Chinese proverb that says, "May you live in interesting times." And these are indeed interesting times. There has been mental stress, anxiety, and lots of hardship faced by you, students, as well as faculty, to be honest, and everyone else. When you consider the lack of certainty there is about the future, all the changes that are taking place, and for students especially, the complete transition suddenly to online learning. So faculty and university has worked very hard on delivering all the content and all the quality of education online in a very short space of time. However, we recognize that this was very difficult and the expectations would be very high to complete the semester as normal. That is why the university leadership and the Board of Deans decided to approve at last with the Senate the pass, no pass system where you get your credits and move on in case you're enduring difficulties in certain courses. At the same time, the optional variable that AUB has introduced, I think, is a very important one, unlike other universities, which applied the very simple blanket pass, no pass. We know many of you have to go into graduate schools. They have expectations whether to go into jobs, or have worked very hard to maintain a high GPA throughout your time, or are indeed fighting to get out of a bad semester or two that you might have had so that you can get back on the right track. For this reason, I think this is a very, if not novel, a very progressive decision. It took time to take, and that, I know that was hard on you, but it took time because we wanted to make sure it worked exactly right. At the end of the day, I think everyone really is concerned about getting through this as safely as possible, first of all, and as successfully as possible. The AUB community is a community in every sense of the word. And we do care about you, the students first of all, but also our staff and faculty and everyone involved. So I'd like to tell you, let's hope these interesting times end soon and we get back to some sort of normal routine when we can go back to the gym, take walks, hang out with friends in malls, go to the movies, restaurants, and all the little things we love to do every day. Take care, enjoy the rest of the show, and I hope that you have a wonderful semester, a great experience of a semester despite everything that we've gone through. Bye.
Let us begin by asking the question, what's happening to our economy? What's up with the Eurobonds? And what are the consequences of COVID-19 on our economy? And what about us as students? What are the next steps? In order to tackle these questions, we'll be talking to Mr. Jamal Saghir. As a brief introduction, Mr. Saghir is an expert in infrastructure, energy, water, international finance, economic development and policy, and has over 25 years of experience at the World Bank. Thank you for talking to us, Mr. Saghir. Now, before we begin and dive into the future prospects and the current situation, could you please give us a brief background of how the Lebanese government got into its current debt situation?
Lebanon is facing a deep accumulation of interrelated political, economic, social, financial, environmental, and health crises, mutually feeding into each other's at different levels. The situation is horrifying. It's what I would call creating the perfect storm, which is rooted in Lebanon's past failed economic, social, and environmental policy. The key element of such a perfect storm are Lebanon vastly import more than it export. It's creating a current account deficit of around 25% of GDP. Compared to the other country, this is very bad. We have an unsustainable currency peg to the US dollars, with devaluation in perspective, inflation increasing, and also the economic depression that we've seen and every Lebanese is living nowadays. We have seen the inability of Lebanon to repay its international financial commitment, as recently with the default on the Eurobond. The banking system is completely paralyzed and not being able anymore to serve its client and the economy. Instead of being part of the solution, it's became part of the problems. We have excessive government borrowing that have inflated the politically well-connected banking sector. Also, what was very interesting, when the interest rates were very high, we've seen a lot of money coming from overseas, especially from the diaspora. But the consequence of that is that about 1% of all accounts are estimated to hold roughly half total bank deposit of around $175 billion. Regional conflict, instability, and the fact that Lebanon revolved around the banking sector and real estate, it created a significant income inequality. Adding to that, the burden of dysfunctional electricity sector, solid waste, water sector, widespread corruption, cronyism, making Lebanon on the top list of those that are mismanaged in the world, All of this brings us to a simple question. Lebanon macroeconomic fundamentals are in problem, and they are among the worst in the world. It's the third most indebted country in the world after Japan and Greece, with a debt to gross GDP of around 156% according to the IMF. Our public balance deficit in percent of GDP is very high. In addition, deposits from resident and non-resident in our banking system have been decreasing since the end of 2018. So this crisis is not simply in the last few months. This crisis has started at least 18 months ago. We had enough signals. We were not able to face the crisis. From one crisis triggered another crisis, and we had the situation that we are living now. To stop the downfall, the economy will need an injection of around at least $25 billion capital right now. I believe it's critical that Lebanon start the process of significant fiscal and monetary adjustment and structural reform, as well as an austerity program, so that we get back economic growth, to be able to create jobs, and also to get the private sector to invest much more and bring back the economy to much better situation and health situation that we are living right now. Yes, we will need access to the International Monetary Fund. Yes, we need the access to the World Bank and the other donors that are essential to help Lebanon restructure its economy, to fund its deficit, and to be able to put us back on a sustainable economic path.
So, what are the implications for a country like Lebanon to go into hard default?
Lebanon is now in a situation that I would call a sudden stop. A sudden stop in capital flow is defined as a sudden slowdown in private capital and inflow in the economy. Sudden stops are usually followed by a sharp decrease in output, private spending, and credit to the private sector, and real exchange rate depreciation. This is exactly what we are living right now in Lebanon for the last few months. And we are facing a deep accumulation of what I call the interrelated political, social, economic, financial, environmental, and health crisis. Today, Lebanon is the third most indebted country in the world after Japan and Greece. The consequence of the bad management of the economy, whether fiscally or monetary, is huge on this generation as well as future generation. So when we look what is happening right now, the minimum we need is around $25 billion of injection of fresh capital to start looking at the light at the end of the tunnel. Lebanon has decided to go what I would call the hard landing scenario, which is characterized by the recent default on its debt obligation. Within this scenario, best practice usually in the world, the government usually seeks the support of International Monetary Fund, international financier, whether bilateral, multilateral, and adopt an austerity and structural reform program to reduce its debt to GDP. The major short-term implication of the hard landing scenario could be summarized as following. Bank failure due to their treasury bills and Eurobond holding, and then a consolidation of the banking sector to an acceptable number. As you know, in Lebanon we have too many banks. We need to consolidate them. We need to have a much more reasonable number of banks, 10, 15, like in other countries. Limit access to international financial market, that's also the impact of this hard lending. A capital control program will have to be put in place in a much more official way. What we have right now is an unofficial capital program. Each bank is almost implementing its own program. This is not sustainable. This is sending the wrong signals to the market, the wrong signals to the people, and also eroding the limited trust that we still have in the banking system. high inflation that we see right now happening, a severe drop in national revenues, significant increase in poverty. As we have seen recently, poverty is increasing in Lebanon to a level which is horrifying. And sooner or later, we have to talk about an official devaluation so that the lira is floated to the market rate.
So we know that the current exchange rate has been fluctuating a lot recently. But do you think that an official exchange rate of 1,515 or even 2,000 could be sustainable? And in regards to private education and universities like AUB, who express their tuition in dollars, how will they be impacted by the current inflation?
The effect of the crisis on institutions of higher education in general and on AUB in particular will be significant. While some schools have already declared that short of any financial support, they may close next semester or next year, higher education will be especially affected by the current crisis, with many institutions will have to adapt quickly to crisis pressure. It's well known that tuition fees, generally account for around 2/3 or more of the revenue of small and medium private college in the US, equivalent to the size of AUB. Enrollment number will be affected and we will need to worry more about the fall of 2020 student enrollment. We should be apprehensive that an even more liquidity squeeze, a devaluated lira, rising unemployment, and diminished access to student loan and grant due to looming bank failure, it will have an impact on the enrollment and a shortfall on what we will see happening next year. The fear that students will either postpone college or switch to less expensive public institution, a related concern that we have that enrollment could be maintained, but only by doling out much more financial aid. The problem will be exacerbated to the extent that financial aid was funded from falling endowment, putting pressure on the operating budget to make up the lot through more unfunded aid. But I have to confess, AUB has done a very good job so far, and the administration is to be congratulated with the way they have been managing this crisis. AUB administration has so far weathered well the financial crisis and debt crisis with early financial measure executed well before the onset of the crisis. In this regard, we would like to see the effort of the administration in transferring $83 million to US Bank. In reality, before the crisis, the administration was able to transfer some of the AUB money overseas, and this to protect it. This money will ensure immediate liquidity that the university will urgently need and will caution shield AUB against the devastating impact of any devaluation or erosion of the pound, as we've seen it right now. On the other hand, capital control imposed by the bank is affecting also AUB ability to be able to access to its own fund in Lebanon. Second, AUB debt profile is resilient to any potential devaluation. The different vulnerability fund that was created by the administration are the right action at that time. However, as the crisis will be deeper, we might be facing much bigger problem that will affect a lot the structure of the universities in Lebanon and AUB in particular. We are wait and see. We are analyzing how this crisis will unfold in the next few months, especially with the closure, especially with the corona in face of us, what kind of enrollment, what kind of profile of student we'll see, what will happen to the academic staff. These are all questions that we need answered in the next few months. It's too early to predict what will happen, but the situation will not be easy.
As part of your experience at the World Bank, you've held directorships in energy, agriculture, and sustainable development. Some people are saying that due to the crisis, the industry and agriculture sectors will inevitably grow. So how do you think the Lebanese economy will change to adapt to the recession, especially with the advent of the gas exports?
The challenges faced by Lebanon I'm talking about the financial, economic, and social challenges, are now compounded due to the corona crisis. Policymakers are now responding to short-term issues related to the corona health crisis, while at the same time they are facing a financial and economic collapse. Without question, current circumstances have revealed that Lebanon is weak to face any crisis. Corona tests the reliability, the sustainability, and the strength of health system and ability to respond and mitigate. Yes, government is doing the right thing. Yes, actions are in place, but this is much bigger when you add it to the economic financial stress that the country is living right now. Actually, the challenge of policymakers in Lebanon is not just to prevent the escalation of the crisis, financial and economic, which, as I said, compounded by the corona, and to mitigate the downturn, but also to implement quickly a serious policy reform program. This means responding rapidly and forcefully to current weakness in the financial sector, including resorting to international assistance. It also means pursuing a prudent counter-cyclical policy, relying on automatic stabilizer, social safety net to protect and help the poor, to address bottleneck, and to become much more prepared to rebuild this economy on a sustainable base. Solutions to deal with the financial crisis are available. We know them. A lot of experts wrote about Lebanon. The Lebanese authority have in front of them all the solution. It's not time to act with determination and perseverance. The way out of the crisis is possible. I am an optimistic person. I've been in development for over 30 years. I was the director of the World Bank for many, many years. I've seen many crises from East Asia to South Asia to Latin America to Europe to Russia. Crisis could be resolved with political will, determination, and collaboration. That's how we deal with crisis. But we need to have in place a very clear reform program, an ambitious reform structural program, and austerity program. This is a must if we have to get out of this crisis. Parallel to that, you need to implement a social safety net program to help mitigate the impact of the crisis, especially on the poor, and to help also the economy come back on a much more sustainable way.
Mr. Saghir, what advice would you give graduating AUB students who will be joining the Lebanese job market in the next few years? And how should we think about job creation in the entrepreneurship track?
Let me now try to address the important question that you have asked me about how I will see AUB student as they enter the labor market in the next few years. First of all, AUB is providing you a very strong academic experience. It's one of the best in the world. I worked around the world and I was always impressed by people who graduated from AUB. They are strong, they are opinionated, they are clear on what they want to do, and they are very ambitious. We've seen it with the many Lebanese in different sectors worldwide. So I'm not worried about the opportunity that will come to you. However, opportunity will not come on their own. Now, if somebody said one day, if opportunity doesn't knock on your door, you should build a door. In other words, I would see you going on the market, looking for opportunities, searching for best fit for you, but at the same time to be patient and perseverant. The first couple of jobs will not be necessarily what you want to do, but I think you should go and enter the market. The most difficult part when you enter the labor market is the entry point. Once you are in that market and you have built a minimum of resume, doors will open for you. Entrepreneurship will be definitely an area where you can develop a lot of expertise, but to be an entrepreneur, you need also experience. Depending of your area of expertise, you can go through the traditional way of doing business. But we've seen in the last few years a lot of people going on startup. Now, with post-corona crisis, the impact on startup businesses will be huge. We will see much more delay in creating them, less funding, and less opportunities. So my advice for the time being is work hard, focus on delivering the best result you can, focus on the ball in terms of what you want to do. It's really, at the end of the day, it's what you would like to do with your career, how you want to build it. I personally built my career in international development. I was a civil servant at the World Bank for over 25 years. I just recently published a book that you can find it on Amazon about stories of a world banker, which will lay down for you the different way I looked at and built my career. But the career is in your hands. It's nobody else who will decide for you. People can advise you. People can give you some way to go. But at the end of the day, it's in your hand. And you should handle it the way you think you can be able to be happy in the life that you would like to live. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Jamal Saghir.
Okay, so in our next segment, we're going to be speaking about the second hot topic, coronavirus, and how to adapt to it. So, dealing with exams, an extended lockdown, mental health, coronavirus panic in general, losing jobs, it can be very frustrating. And so in this segment, we're going to be having student perspectives and expert perspectives and advice on how to deal with coronavirus. Due to the drastic effects of the economic crisis, one can't help but ask simply, how are we going to cope? And let's face it, mental health is an issue we're all bound to kind of struggle with at some point in our lives. And it's expected now more than ever that we might be facing these challenges. So with us today is Mr. Chant Kazandjian, who's going to be giving us life tips, and he's going to be answering our main questions about how to overcome the current crisis.
Thank you, Seema, for having me for the first AUB Talks. It's a pleasure to be here with you. So my name is Chant. I work at the Counseling Center. I do hold a specialty in clinical mental health counseling and an active research in mental health, student wellness, and counseling. And again, it's a pleasure for me to be here today to talk to you about mental health in these difficult and challenging times.
So, Sean, starting with the first question. Current economic crisis only seems to be getting worse from here on out. Hopefully, maybe in the future, the long-term future, it's going to get better. But for the short term, statistics show that we shouldn't really be expecting great things. Keeping this in mind, what advice can you give for any Lebanese citizen and even an AUB student on how to cope with this issue, how to mentally prepare ourselves for this issue?
That's a really interesting question, and a lot of people are wondering what to do because we seem to face difficult days and very much of a challenge that we hope to escape, and then we run into a bigger challenge. So it seems our day-to-days are quite difficult these days. A lot of people are wondering what to do about it. We are, more than other countries, familiar with different challenges, and we do face more difficulty than other people in the world. So as a country, we are used to continuous turmoil, instability, whether it's political, economic, social, and so on. So I don't see that this is a different aspect of resilience. We are still, looking into resilience as a whole, as a nation, not individually, but as a nation, we're quite resilient. So in these difficult times, we do require to put in a bit more effort. To stay focused on mental health and to stay up to date, if I want to call it, on coping mechanisms to deal with what is happening around us and how it affects us. It's very important for us to be aware of how these economic challenges, social challenges do affect us and affect our mental health. And once we are aware of what our needs are, we're able to do certain activities and exercises that are able to help us cope better with what is going on. Expecting uncertainty is the first thing. Given the economic situation and the political turmoil, we don't know what will happen next. So just understanding that uncertainty and accepting that things will be uncertain is also the first step to go. We might not always be in control. We might not expect what's going to happen next, but we know that uncertainty is a given now. And somehow we need to understand how we're able to cope with it and have it in our daily lives without it disrupting our goals and what we're out there to achieve and what we're out there to do. So coping is a big keyword. Throughout, I think we should not forget that we are kind of responsible for our own selves, to take care of ourselves in this process. So maintaining a healthy lifestyle, even with the most difficult of days and challenges that we face, is important. So keeping a kind of like a routine for us to stick with, an active lifestyle in terms of exercise, eating healthy, getting enough sleep, connecting with others around us who are sharing basically the challenges that we are going through. All of these are equally important for us to be able to understand what is happening and are able to respond effectively to the challenges that are around us.
And also, mental health is no joke, of course, and it's already known this country does have its fair share of statistics indicating high depression and anxiety rates. So keeping this in mind, how do you expect the current economic crisis to impact and influence these statistics? Do you expect that they're going to go up, or will they stay constant, or maybe even decrease as kind of the Lebanese community gets together? So I think your insight would be very good at the matter.
Really important question. I mean, we do know that all these challenges, whether economic, social, environmental, do have a direct effect on individuals' mental health. And we do expect that with increased challenges and limited coping skills, individuals will face more mental health challenges. However, it's early to say that these challenges will have a direct link on increased suicide numbers and increased rates of depression. Because it's a bit more complex. A lot of factors play into that. And like I said, the more we are able to connect with others and the more we're able to connect with resources and professional help that is available to us, the more we are able to combat increasing rates of depression and suicide and so on. So it all depends on how our response is to these challenges. If we are able to cope well, if we're able to respond well, we are able to minimize the stress and we are able to minimize people going through these challenging times alone. So if I can predict numbers, I won't have any concrete numbers. We know by research that the more the challenges, the limited coping mechanisms, individuals would seek more professional help. So this is where we would advise anyone who is not feeling well, who feels like they need to talk to a professional, that they do that early on, so that we are able to respond to their needs and we are, as a community, able to protect one another and help one another get through these difficult times.
Now, basing on personal experience, I actually was really active with the Thawra when it really started off and it pushed through, and I'm still offering whatever support I can, hopefully. But for those students that are still giving an all-out effort, and at the same time they have to kind of balance out with the schoolwork, with university work, it's extremely difficult. I know that firsthand, and the pressure of both can really have this kind of suffocating feeling. and can kind of bring about this suffocation onto the student. What advice can you give students like me who are kind of struggling with balancing the two? I think we could really appreciate any advice.
Very, very important. We've had a lot of students ask us about this question specific because it is a big challenge to juggle between what is happening in the country and what you're supposed to be doing. Studying is a full-time job, and managing all the assignments and the academic responsibilities that are unending and don't have a pause button. It is quite interesting to see how you can be actively involved throughout your day with what is happening around you, and also make time for academics for you to stay on track with what you need to do. However, I think the biggest clash that we faced with students was that students were not kind of ready yet to accept the new reality of things. The new reality was that the uncertainty that was around us, with roadblocks, with protests, with all of what was happening, everything was uncertain. Like you said, we didn't know what was going to happen next, if roads were closed, what was going to happen with the country, with the protests and all that. And with the university, it was also not really clear if students were attending classes or were going to stay home, and what were happening with the exams and all that. So a lot of the students who did not really accept this uncertainty faced a lot of anxiety because they thought they were not in control. They did not know what to expect, and they did not know what to do. So the first thing was just helping them realize that it's okay not to be in control. It's okay to be uncertain about what's going to happen next. And the first step was to actually look into some realistic goal setting individually. What I can do today to help me, if I want to go to the protest, what helps me go to the protest, and still what helps me stay focused on my exams and assignments and coursework that I need to follow up on. So individual goal setting was important. And the more individuals were able to achieve these minimal goals that they set for themselves, the more accomplished they felt and the more in control. So it is important, one, like I said, to accept the uncertainty of what's happening around us, but also kind of have our own bubble, isolate ourselves from what is happening around us, and see how all of these events do affect us, but eventually how we're also able to meet our goals given what is happening. So for example, we've asked individuals to see the bigger picture. So I'd also ask you, what would be the bigger picture for you, given the revolution and given your academics? What does it individually mean to you in terms of revolution and in terms of academics? Why does the revolution mean so much to you? And why does academics mean so much to you? So if you see the bigger picture, you're able to see what kind of drives you, what's your passion, and what motivates you to be part of this and that. And by seeing that bigger picture and how you fit in, you're able to increase your motivation and see how that motivation drives you to achieve those goals. So goal setting in each of these areas will help you get through. However, the bottom line is to accept that uncertainty, accept that maybe these plans of yours won't go according to how you had planned them. So what I was saying is that, what I understood is that you and others united because you had a common aspiration for the country. But you're asking, how do I juggle my personal goals with the common goals set with these other people, representing the revolution and so on and so forth. So my take on that is that that is something, the outcomes of what is happening is something that you can't really control. And so that adds to that level of anxiety and uncertainty. Because yes, you have figured out what the common goal is, but yet you're quite uncertain about what's going to happen next, if this will come to fruition, if it's something that you'll be able to succeed at. So your individual goals are different than your common goals. So it's not fair for you to say, I'm going to put my common goal that I share with a lot of these people ahead of my own personal goals. because your personal goals to pursue medicine, to pursue higher education are also important. So how do you make a balance? The proper, I mean, the way to go about it is to balance between what you want to do in terms of your career and your future with what you see for this country. They should go hand in hand, and one cannot take over the other. Because if the country is doing okay, and there is that change introduced, and your personal and your career are kind of suffering because you did not have a plan for that, then you're still kind of at an imbalance in your own personal life. If your career succeeds, but then you can't live in the country because of all these circumstances, then again, there's that imbalance that you need to deal with. So it should go hand in hand.
Okay, thank you, Chant, so much for your insight about, how to cope with the economic crisis and how to balance out, life and what's going on outside and how to manage your mental health. I'm quite confident your advice will be taken to heart. It will be greatly needed. Okay, now let's hear from a student perspective. With us today is student Joe Abi Saab. Joe is an AUB student, and he's going to be sharing his opinions and insights on the problematic issues of simply being an AUB student in such times of crises. So, hello, Joe. Welcoming you to the show. Okay, I gotta ask, as a student myself, are your courses progressing more or less just as normal, just as they were back when we were actually attending university? Or do you feel like you're being impeded because of what's happening, whether it be due to online teaching or certain kind of lack of interaction and communication? Your insight would be greatly helpful.
بالنسبة لماي كورسز like I can generalize في some professors إنه ما عم بيحطوا قصص على مودل، عم بيمشوا كتير على السريع even بالlecture مثلا ما فينا أوقات نسأل أسئلة إلا للآخر، وإنه أوقات الإنترنت بطيئة وما عم بياخدوا into consideration هذا الوضع، إنه أوقات بيكون عنا exam بوقت الأونلاين سيشن أو إنه اتليست يحطوا قصص على مودل إنه بالآخر. وفي أكيد professors عم بيحطوا كل شيء على مودل even عم بيعملوا online meeting إنه one by one وإنه مثل كأنه office hours وهيك إنه منيح.
What's your insight on the pass-fail decision issued by the university? Do you think it gives students a much-needed relief, or do you think it might actually make certain students kind of more worried, more anxious? Students that may be inclined for, master's degree, postgraduate degrees, or medical degrees, and applying to that, pass-fail might actually be worse for them. So your insight on how this might be affecting their kind of psyche would be really good.
بالنسبة للpass or fail system صراحة it was the best decision taken إنه فينا نشوف our grades and then decide شو بدنا, and it even motivated us to continue studying إنه knowing that the university is taking into consideration the situation وهيك, if it was the best decision.
So some students are actually facing difficulty and are actually quite anxious about paying tuition for the next semester due to bank restrictions, amongst other things. Are you facing any difficulties yourself?
As we all know, the economy of Lebanon started contracting since September, where small businesses started closing, and got worse when the government enforced capital control and the currency started depreciating, which led to many people losing their job and or switching to part-time jobs. And this situation got even worse with this COVID-19, which interrupted the whole supply chain. And without the help of the government, many businesses can barely survive. And with taking all this into consideration, I highly doubt that students will still be able to pay their tuition fees.
So thank you for your valuable time, Joe. Your discussion, your insights have really been helpful.
Hi, my name is Abed. I'm an AUB student studying for my master's degree in civil engineering. I want to talk about anxiety and how it's making us more stressful and leading to depression sometimes, because staying at home for a long time and being unable to interact with your friends and overthinking all the time about the uncertainty and what's going to happen next, and when all of that is gonna end, and what's gonna happen in the following couple of months. So me as a graduate student, I feel so anxious and worried about my thesis, about the deadline, about my courses, the pass no pass method that will be used in AUB might affect some students in a negative way, because some students need to continue their PhD degree and might need like a high GPA. So nothing changed for many students, and I need to talk about the our mental health in a general way, and how the coronavirus is affecting our mental health. Just seeing the news every day and seeing how the cases are rising every day, it can make you anxious by itself, since you're so afraid to go out of your house, and you're forced to maintain social distancing with everybody. So this might lead to depression, and thus unable to focus on your courses and everything you need to do. So everything becomes more harder. So I hope everything is gonna end soonly. But we need to. Our mental health is the most important thing to talk about nowadays, because anxiety is something that is common now, and we need to talk about it.
Okay, so to kick off our coronavirus segment, we're going to bring back our good friend Chant. Chant, hello again. And starting with the hot topic at the moment, coronavirus. Our first question is going to be, when this all kind of started, was this panic expected? Was the reaction, the public reaction, really kind of anticipated beforehand? When it started just in China, it wasn't perhaps expected to go global, and then it did. And so when it kind of started escalating slowly towards that level, was it kind of expected and anticipated that the reactions would be that we're going to run out of toilet paper? Was that kind of part of what we should have been prepared for?
Yes, I mean, it is a quite interesting time that we live in. I don't think the world really expected this much of a pandemic when it first started, and I think that adds to the stress and anxiety that people are facing, because they weren't prepared for something like this. It came really out of the blue. We were uncertain about what it was, and then once we started to know more about it, it became widespread through China and in different parts of the world. And I think people were just not expecting it. And this added to that fear, anxiety, and stress. So it is expected for people to panic, if you want to put it that way, because there's a lot of things that we don't know, and a lot of things that we don't know what to expect next. So that fear of uncertainty is quite normal in these stages. We are knowing more by the day of how it's transmitted, of what these outcomes will be, but it's quite scary that we know that it will be worse, or the numbers will get higher, and it does affect a portion of the population who has some chronic illnesses, who is in a specific age group. So we're scared for us to contract the disease, and we're also scared about other people who might catch the disease, who are around us, who may be more critical than us at this point.
Keeping in mind that, preventative measures are already being implemented, whether by the government or by people unto themselves in general, and keeping in mind that the classification and the behavior of the virus is a bit more kind of familiar now than it was when it first came out, from mode of transmission to kind of how to kind of eliminate it by washing our hands with soap and water or using hand sanitizers. Do you think that knowing all of this and having this kind of become part of our daily routine, that the panic rates and the stress and anxiety about the virus are going to be reduced, or, with already everything going around in this country, that no, they might actually escalate these kind of stress levels?
I mean, the human reaction or response to these specific events is quite normal. People did not know what to expect, and people thought that, they might be in quarantine for longer than what was expected. And I think, based on what we're seeing, that is quite true. I mean, at first it was a week of stay at home, and then it became about 2 weeks, and now we're talking about a month. So people really did not know what to expect, and that fed into the fear and anxiety. And people do this because it's instinctual. We would like to, as a human race, preserve our own selves. So stocking up on toilet paper might seem quite childish, but it's also a way for us to self-preserve. Not through toilet paper.
That's true.
But it's some of the behaviors that are instinctual. So fear drives us to do things maybe instinctually without thinking clearly. So if I see someone who's anxious about what's going to happen next and is fearful, I will expect that they would do some things that may be irrational, but it stems from their deep down, from their fears and
for self-preservation,
Yeah, for self-preservation.
Yeah.
But I do
I
hope
understand
that with more of the awareness that you're talking about, with physicians, spreading more awareness with the guidelines and all these media highlighting what people need to do, that we organize ourselves a bit better for us to give resources to also to the people who are more vulnerable, who might need the last supply of toilet paper, who might need the last supply of canned food and all these things, that we are mindful of all those individuals around us. So for us to, as a community, come together and see how we can support one another, then just be 100% driven by our instincts.
Personally speaking, I can attest to the difficulties of being left on lockdown for prolonged periods of time. It's frustrating. So, not to mention that now this is implemented throughout the entire country, students, people of all types, they're kind of stuck with family in their homes. And let's face it, this can actually kind of push out certain conflicts and kind of drive certain conflicts to happen due to kind of static which can happen between family members. So keeping that in mind, do you have any pieces of advice for people like me kind of struggling, staying in on lockdown?
Interesting question, and I like that you kind of ended the talk with that one, because it's really important. I mean, this is our new lives from now on. I mean, as far as we're in quarantine, all our routines have changed, and oftentimes we find ourselves, being stuck with people, our family members that we rarely would see on any given week because everyone had their jobs and everyone was busy doing things outside the house. So it's a new state of being. It's something that we have to get used to. So interestingly, it does affect us, and there are ways where we could do things that will help us cope with staying at home or staying with individuals 24/7. So the first would be to create a new schedule for us. We have to see what we have to do on a daily basis and create a new routine. Our routines may have been waking up in the morning, go to work or go to school, and then come back home at night. Now that that has not been the case, if we're trying to study at home or trying to work from home, then that is our new schedule. So we have to understand when is a good time for us to wake up in the morning and do that at any given time on a daily basis, so that we create that routine and a pattern, and to try to build that schedule on a daily basis. it does not mean if we're stuck with a few individuals in the house that our entire day revolves around them. No, our lives do continue outside of that house with what we're studying and what we're doing. And we have to create that time into our time in the house to make sure that we get to do what we need to do, and we also get some alone time. So I don't know what that might look like for specific individuals, but having your alone time would be spending time in your room alone, where either you're attending to what you need to attend to in terms of classes and assignments, or just sitting there meditating, reading a book, listening to music, etc. So try to create time where you can distance yourself from people around you to create time for yourself. That is something that gives you that distance from people around you. Another thing that will also ultimately help cope being in a house with family is that you try to do things that are pleasurable for you. So let's say if drawing or art or music is something you're passionate about, schedule time for yourself to be able to do some of these activities that you enjoy. Watching movies is another thing. Do some of these activities for yourself on your own that will give you a sense of autonomy, and that you're not always, linked to other individuals in the same household. What you could also do is connect with friends. And I know now this is done virtually, but schedule virtual video calls with your friends. Still be able to connect with them virtually. Try to keep up with your social circle. See what they're up to. Try to support one another through these video calls and stay connected. Last but not least, try to keep active. This will ultimately help. I know when we're confined at home, we find ourselves a bit lazy. So try to stay physically active, engage in some physical exercise at home, eat healthy, sleep well, set specific goals, like I said earlier, to get you through your day. The more you're able to do, the more accomplished you'd feel, and the more you're able to feel like your life outside of the household is able to move on, and that yes, you're confined in a physical setting, but your responsibilities and what you need to do are still ongoing, and you still are able to be productive and achieve what you need to achieve.
Thank you very much, Chant, for your advice and your insights today. I know that many people are going to take them to heart. They really have been helpful. Thank you. Okay, so introducing Dr. Kanj. Dr. Kanj is the head of the Division of Infectious Diseases at AUBMC. She's a world-renowned medical researcher, and she's recently received the prestigious Abdul Hamid Award for Arab researchers. Hello, Dr. Kanj. It's a great honor to have you here with us. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us today. And so our first question for today is going to be, how does the coronavirus differ from the SARS and MERS viruses? What are the main features? Why is the virus spreading like wildfire, causing a global pandemic rather than just a kind of local outbreak or even an epidemic? This is something that we've seen on a global scale. We haven't seen the same applied with the SARS and MERS. They were kind of more contained in certain areas. So why is it that there's such a drastic difference in the transmission mechanisms?
When we talk about viruses and how we spread, we talk about the ability of a virus to be contagious from one person to the other. This is measured by a factor that we call R0. For COVID-19, the R0 is 2.2 compared to other viruses such as influenza or other coronaviruses, where the R0 was 1 or less. And that's why the ability of the COVID-19 to spread is much, much higher, because each infected person can spread the virus to at least 2 and sometimes 3 different people.
So how do people know if they're healthy enough to isolate themselves at home, or whether they should go to an isolation center? or if they should go to a hospital.
Isolation can be done anywhere. It can be done at home, in a center, or in a hospital. If someone is not sick enough to require to be in the hospital setting, I think they can isolate themselves at home if they have a large house that allows them to be in their room and not sharing a bathroom with someone else. If that is not possible, then they can be isolated in large centers where there are the requirements to keep him or her isolated from the rest of the people. Now, obviously, in houses where you have crowding, when you have many family members living in a house that has 1 or 2 rooms and a single bathroom, this tends to be difficult to achieve, and therefore these are scenarios where one has to look at isolation in a different place other than the house.
Okay, and as valuable as receiving so many, outlooks about how to deal with this virus and the outbreak is, issues about conflicting kind of notes and memos are being kind of brought up. And so one of them is stating that using wet wipes and hand sanitizers isn't as effective at kind of obliterating the virus off of surfaces as using soap and water is. So how true is that, and can we really rely on statements saying otherwise?
Is using sanitizer and wet wipes not enough to eradicate the virus? I think it really depends on the composition of the wet wipes. If the wet wipes have alcohol and chlorhexidine, or if they have quaternary ammonium, or if they have bleach, then they are very effective to clean the surface. So we need to really look at the composition of the wet wipe that's being used. Alcohol hand sanitizers are also as effective as soap and water. We just have to make sure that the alcohol composition is 60% at least, and in that case they can be as effective as soap and water, but they have to be done in the right way, where all the surfaces of the hands are rubbed carefully, including the nails, to make sure that the hands are all clean.
Dr. Kanj, how long do you suspect people will remain in lockdown? Do you think it will be 45 days like the AUB administration suggested, or do you expect it to last much longer than that?
It's impossible to predict for how long we need to keep people under isolation. We are now hearing many authorities saying until the end of April. Unfortunately, at this point, it's hard to predict if we're going to have an end to the pandemic in April, or if it's going to persist for many more months. There are a lot of calculations and statistical models that are being done right now to estimate, but these are all calculations. I think we're going to have to wait until the end of April to see the number of new cases and then decide if the isolation can stop then or has to be prolonged for much longer.
Even if the number of cases decrease because of quarantine, isn't there a risk that they might increase again once the lockdown is lifted?
There is a concern, of course, that after we lock down people for a long time and the number of cases decreases, if there is a single case after the lockdown is released, we can have again spread of the virus. And that is why I think if everyone follows the basic principles of preventing spreading of viruses by washing their hands, by wearing masks if they have any symptoms of sore throat, cough, or sputum production, to avoid crowding, etc., for several weeks after the lockdown is lifted until we have a better understanding of the situation.
Thank you very much for your time, Dr. Kanj. أستاذ بالعلوم الاجتماعية بالجامعة الدولية المفتوحة. أهلا فيك دكتور. فيك تشاركنا توقعاتك لكيف رح نلاقي شغل بس نتخرج؟
نعم. يعني كوني أنا متخصص بهيدي القصص بالتحديد، بس قبل ما نفوت بالقصص التقنية حابب أوجه رسالة إنه لازم الإنسان يتأمل ويكون عنده الروح الإيجابية، لأنه مع كل هالنكسات اللي عم نكون فيها وخصوصي مع هيدي الأزمة اللي نحن فيها لازم الواحد يضل متفائل. ومثل ما بيقول المثل إنه إذا أنت بتتفائل بالخير بتلاقيه يعني، واللي بيحب أو بفكر بالقصص الإيجابية بتوصل له بالنهاية. فردا على هذا السؤال بالتحديد، إذا ما بدنا نكون بالتفاؤل، في دراسات بالأرقام بتقول إنه مش رح تنضر هيدي القصة، إنه إذا تخرجنا كيف بدنا نلاقي شغل وهالقصص والحكايات، هيدي قصص هينة يعني. في كتير دراسات أنا عم بعملها هون تحديدا، بس للاقي الورقة يعني عم نشتغل نحن ليل نهار على هذا الموضوع، وبالنهاية الأرقام يعني الأرقام ما بتكذب، والرسوم البيانية كلها بتبرهن إنه يعني فايتين بالحيطان. بعتقد كلكم حتلاقوا شغل إن كان بالزبالة، بعتقد لملم زبالة ونرجع نفرز ونبيع تنك وحديد أو رقاصات ورقاصين. ف بس خلينا بوزيتيف.
في جدال مهم هلأ محتل كل الصالونات والبلاكين بكل مناطق لبنان. شو أحسن، الموت من الجوع ولا من الكورونا؟ شو بتنصح الأجيال الجاي؟
نعم، يمكن الناس ما عم تاخد هذا السؤال بجدية، بس نعم عم يدور على بالنا كتير، هو إنه كيف حنموت. هل حنموت من الجوع لأنه حتنفقد الأكل والأطعمة، أو حنموت من الكورونا كفيروس؟ أنا تفسيري منطقي أكتر من هيك. بمراقبتي ومن خلال أنا معايشتي لهذا الوضع كمان بحس منطقيا التقيت إنه نحن حنموت، لأنه ما هيك ولا هيك، نحن حنقتل بعض. لأنه في كتير أسباب وعوامل عم بتخلينا يمكن نوصل لهيدي المرحلة. لأنه إذا جيراني معي يوطوا صوت التلفزيون تبعهم وكل يوم أخبار بس بالليل فجأة بيعلى الصوت، أو ابنهم الصغير حمودي بيستحلي الساعة 10 يفتح دربكي مثلا، فبدي اضطر أنا يعني إذا ما عم يشموا بالحكي إنه يصير شيء بقى لنخلص من الموضوع يعني. وكمان إذا بدهم الأولادهم الزغتورين يعني ببراءة الطفولة تبعيتهم على طول عم بيخبطوا ويصرخوا ويعيطوا تحت، فإذا ما الحكي عم يفهموا وعم يحترموني، في بالنهاية بده يصير شيء يعني. فبحس الأزمة هيدي حتى تدينا لهيدي القصة إنه نحن بكرة نقتل بعض يعني، بس بإيجابية يعني، نكون نحن إيجابيين نحن عم نتعامل مع قتل جيراننا إذا ما بوطوا صوت التلفزيون.
Okay, وآخر شيء to end everything up, wrap everything up. Thank you so much للمستمعين اليوم for making our show successful today. Thank you to all the speakers, من students and experts that have shared their time with us just to participate in this activity. And we've all really had a good time conversing, and we all really hope that our discussions and our insights today have really supported and helped everyone in the ways that we hope they would.